Okay, I am here with Stacy, who for privacy reasons is not going to have her camera on, but is very excited to verbally share her story with you all. So thank you so much, Stacy, for agreeing to do this.
I'm so happy to do it with you, Jen. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So Stacy has been on an incredible journey. I just wanted to give you a chance, Stacy, to just share a little bit of your life before you got sick, just kind of what things were like for you. Any highlights, anything you want to share about like what happened before, you got this really serious illness.
Well, okay. Well, um, I'm old, so it's a long story, but I'll give you the short version. I was very busy. I was just somebody who had always three or four or five things going on.
Yeah.
Before I got sick, I traveled all the time. I also owned three businesses, and so I worked as a traveling consultant. I owned a little restaurant, and I had a coaching practice for women. So I was pretty busy all the time and running around and doing all the things.
Yes.
And um, and I was loving it. It was, it was a great life. It was busy, but it was definitely challenging and definitely depleting as I look back.
Mm-hmm.
It was for sure. Um, so in March of 2020, COVID hit,
Yeah.
and I was one of the early first waivers.
Yeah.
And I was pretty sick for a long time. And of course, back then, nobody knew anything about what was going on, and nobody could offer much. And I did a lot of research on my own about what might be helpful.
Hmm.
At that point, they weren't hospitalizing people who weren't, dying. So,
Right.
um, so I was at home with my wife. We both were sick for weeks and weeks and weeks,
Wow.
and
So it,
finally
it
started.
hit you pretty hard, right out of the bat, it
Really
sounds
hard.
like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really hard. And of course, there were no drugs or anything. And, they wanted to try antibiotics, but I wasn't really into that. And they wanted to try, who knows what. And um, so they also wanted to send me to specialists.
Mm.
So through the course of the next year, I probably saw 20 specialists. There were
Wow.
cardiologists, and there were pulmonologists, and there were sleep specialists, and there were everybody. And the one I have to say, my I was very lucky to have a primary care provider who was supportive of all this,
Mm.
and who really kind of got it that after a while I was over the specialist and wanted to take a more holistic approach.
Now, did you start getting the neurological symptoms right away, or can you tell a little bit about how things progressed for you over that year?
Yeah, it was really weird. That whole first month when I was super sick was just a blur.
Yeah.
And I know that there were neurological things going on as well as physical, and I don't really remember much of it. But after that, I thought I started to get a little better. And I actually went
Mm-hmm.
back to work at my restaurant um, in the middle of that summer.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out pretty quickly that I was having all kinds of neurological issues. I was having hand-eye coordination issues. I was having lots of memory issues and executive function issues. I couldn't take a coffee order. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
remember it from the counter to the coffee stand.
Right.
I couldn't make change. I couldn't remember people's names. I couldn't remember where we kept the cream.
Yeah.
All the things that were just so hard. So I realized pretty quickly that I was not going to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Plus, I would be on my feet for, 10 minutes and I would be exhausted. So the fatigue
Yeah.
was a huge part of it too. And
Mm-hmm.
so it only took me a few days of that to realize that this was not going to work. And I think that's what prompted me to start figuring out what else maybe I needed to do. So,
Mm-hmm. And so that's when you
um,
saw all these specialists. They weren't really giving you anything that felt substantial, and you
right.
just decided to take a more holistic approach at that point, it
Yep,
sounds like.
exactly. The
Yeah.
one who helped me the most was a neuropsychologist who
Hmm.
did some testing and saw the damage there. And, while we still didn't understand it very much back then, I don't think we still
Hmm.
do, but
Right.
um, but She wisely said, a lot of it looks like a brain, treat it like a brain injury.
Okay.
That go along with brain injury and stroke recovery and that sort of thing. So I
Yeah.
think that helped. I think that got me on the path to,
Yes.
working more with the nervous system and
Yes.
less with the physical body and all the, just less focus on um, the individual symptoms
Right.
and really more of a systemic approach.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
beautiful. It sounds like it really did like attack the brain and the nervous system for you. And I think that's confusing for people because that can create so many different disparate symptoms that seem really chaotic sometimes. But it sounds like seeing this specialist, it helped you recognize that there was kind of like a root system being attacked that could be directly addressed.
yeah, exactly. And full disclosure, 30 years ago, I studied acupuncture.
Oh, I
And
didn't realize
yeah,
that.
I don't know if
How
I ever told
cool.
you that, Jen,
Yeah.
but yeah, I studied acupuncture and I got a master's degree in acupuncture. I never practiced.
Hmm.
Life changed and I never sat for the boards and I never actually um, practiced. Um, but anyway, I think that way back then gave me an appreciation for a systemic approach
Right. Right.
and made me a little bit I don't want to say suspicious, but, but I'll say it of Western medicine
Sure.
and if I break a bone, I want Western medicine.
Of course.
Um, but if I have a systemic um, neurological and microbiological thing going on, I
Yeah.
I think there are lots of other things that we
Right.
can do. So that's why I was so happy when I finally found well, I had found that the support group, the Body Politic for people
Yes.
with long COVID, and so met lots of people there who were
Yeah.
having similar issues, and there was so much support there about
Oh.
just what people were doing and what they were trying, and lots
Yeah.
of kindred spirits and lots of space for raging and lots of
Yeah.
space for
Well,
good
and
reflection.
that kind of brings me, I mean, you shared a little bit about what it was like when you tried to go back to work, but there's a lot of people out there with some very debilitating symptoms of long COVID out there, and I want to make sure people understand like what it was really like for you when you were at your worst. Like, can you describe kind of a day in your life when you were really at rock bottom?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
after I realized that I couldn't go back to work, um, probably for a year or more, my worst days were I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah.
My worst days were eh, having to lay in bed and plan how I was going to get to the bathroom
Mm-hmm.
and then plan how I was going to get back, or maybe just sit in the bathroom for a while to gather the energy to get
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Breathing was always hard. And so always this air hunger, just trying to get a full deep breath
Yeah.
and really having to be conscious about breathing all the time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sleeping well because I wasn't breathing well and I was anxious and it was just you know everything. But I
Yeah.
was also having all kinds of symptoms. I have lists of I think at the peak there were something like 80 or 90 symptoms
Wow.
that we were tracking and it was everything from neuropathy to uh tinnitus to it, all kinds of gastric disturbances, headaches, lots of brain fog. On my worst days, I really couldn't. I couldn't figure out. Um, like I had been a cook, right, in a
Mhm.
professional kitchen, and I couldn't figure out how to make a cup of tea.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was hard. I just couldn't put it together to,
Yeah.
put the water in the kettle and get the kettle boiling and find the tea bag. That was too many things.
Yeah.
And so that, on my worst days, those were some of the things that were really bad. But there was
Yeah.
also pain. There was a
Mm.
lot of joint pain, a lot of muscle pain, a lot of just inexplicable, weird, like electric nerve kind of pain
Mhm.
going on.
Mhm.
And could never really tell. You never knew what was going to pop up. So it was like a game of whack-a-mole.
Right.
You
Yeah.
think that you got something under control and then something else would pop up.
Yeah.
Um, so At one point, my heart would race if I did anything
Yeah.
beyond just lay on the couch.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't I couldn't even watch TV. It was just I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't read.
Too
Um,
stimulating.
it was
Yeah.
all too stimulating, so I spent a lot of time very quiet and, um, just interestingly enough, I could text on my phone
Mm.
pretty
Mhm.
easily, so that was the way that I was able to keep in touch with people, but I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
I just it was too much energy to talk
Yeah.
and put the thoughts together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at one point, somewhere in that spell, I went to a speech therapist that the neuropsychologist recommended, and he really helped me get some vocal tone and strength back.
Oh, good.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I had to use a microphone um, on my phone or on my computer because I couldn't get enough breath behind my voice.
Right.
People could hear me, right?
It's amazing just as you're talking, I think that we don't always realize like how much energy our nervous system actually uses every day, like our brain and our nervous system, like as humans, it's actually like a huge amount of our total energy that we use every day. And when our energy system breaks, like you don't realize until then, like how much effort it actually takes to do these little tasks that we just take for granted when we have a metabolism that's actually working, right? When we have this energy system that's actually working. So, I mean, you had a crash course in like what it actually takes to have a functioning nervous system and brain.
It's so true. I learned so much about conserving energy
Yeah.
then. And, I was on the support group, I was learning about um, some of the chronic fatigue folks were sharing stuff that they had experienced too, and some
Mm-hmm.
of the techniques and some of the resources about how to conserve energy. And I
Yeah.
learned the spoon theory
Yes.
and
So helpful.
figured out,
Yeah.
yeah, so helpful, and figured out how to budget spoons and how to think about it. And, you know, it, it wasn't overnight. I mean, absorbing a concept like that took months.
Yeah. Yeah.
My brain just was not working. I also used to be a super creative person,
Mm.
and I was into everything. I was into drawing and painting and cooking and creating all kinds of fun decor for the restaurant and doing. I just loved to do everything
Yeah.
and writing, and that whole creative part of my brain was totally frozen.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I don't know if it was you that said this or somebody said this, that, the brain is going to conserve energy
Yeah.
and it's going to think about it's going to decide what's most important. And breathing is more important than painting when you're in
Yes.
that,
Yes,
so
exactly.
when,
Yeah.
when you're in that mode. So it really is kind of like the hierarchy of things.
Yes.
And so it's true. I learned a lot about that and about how to adjust. And that was a hard adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's the whole emotional. I mean, we're talking about all the physical effects, but emotionally, I mean, this kind of experience is so devastating, and traumatizing. So I'm sure that's something that you're probably still processing through now that you have more capacity to do that, I would guess.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I really think so. I mean, it all becomes much more clear. And even just
Yeah.
being able to talk about it with you today
Yeah.
is it just puts it all in perspective, and it
Yeah.
really makes me realize, first of all, how sick I was
Yes.
and how far I've come.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful for all that, and
Yeah.
there're just so many components to it
Well,
that
yeah, let's get into that a little bit. So you mentioned you joined this support group that was really helpful and just how to think about fatigue and how to just manage, your energy day to day. And it sounds like you were already open to a more holistic way of looking at the body. And then you were led to Mary Reddick's antiviral diet. Am I remembering
exactly.
that correct? Okay. So
Yep,
yeah,
there
go
were
ahead
some
and start from there. Yeah, what you
okay.
started doing.
Well, there were some folks on the support group who were having some good success,
Hmm.
and they were feeling a little better, and they were talking about how they were hopeful about this protocol. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. And at that point, I had thankfully been approved for disability.
Hmm.
Um, which was like my main job. I don't even know how I did that.
Yeah, right.
My main job, applying for disability and
Yeah.
jumping through all the hoops that they had to do. But anyway, at that same time, I thought, well, this is my job,
Yeah.
is to figure out how to get better. And so when I joined Mary's group, um, first of all, I committed to it 100%. Like that was it. It sounded harsh because there were so many things that you couldn't do and couldn't have. But what I thought was, look, I haven't been able to get very far on my own here,
Yeah.
and none of the doctors have been able to help me. So I'm going to pick one thing and stick with it.
And this
And
was a big dietary change for you, if I'm remembering correctly. Like weren't you mostly vegetarian before
I was
that?
mostly vegetarian. I would
Yeah.
dabble, but
Uh-huh.
I would occasionally have a little bite of meat, and I would eat some chicken and fish,
Hmm.
but I was pretty much, yeah, very vegetarian. And I owned a bakery.
Right.
Restaurant
Okay.
with
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah. That's
bakery.
right. That's right. Yeah.
So we were constantly cooking up sweets and
Yeah.
breads and buns and delicious things. And so carbs were like, you know, the whole world.
Yeah.
And uh, so that was a big, big shift. Even though since I had been sick, I wasn't really craving that kind of stuff anyway. And I couldn't make it if I wanted to anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but I decided I was going to commit to it.
Yeah.
And if I was going to get better, I had to change things.
And
And
for people who might be listening who don't know, this is a very therapeutic style of ketogenic diet. So very, very high in the animal fats and very, very low in the carbohydrates and designed in a very specific way to support the immune system and support the repairing of the nervous system. So a big shift in terms of the macronutrients that you were
yeah,
consuming. Yeah. Yeah.
huge shift. And, that part wasn't all that hard once I learned what I was supposed to be doing. And at that point, my brain was still not functioning really well,
Mhm.
but there were lists of what to do and
Yeah.
what to have. And, we met once a week and were able to, I was able to learn from people what they were doing, and Mary coached us along. And so learning about switching from my previous diet to animal protein and fat. And the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever are pretty much nothing but soup.
Yeah.
So I mean, we all called ourselves the supers or the super troopers,
Cute.
because
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
and there were a few of us who were kind of going through it at the same time. So we did this whole detox thing together,
Yes.
and you could just feel your body going, what is this?
Yes.
But after a few weeks of feeling really awful, which was pretty typical, I guess,
Yes.
I started to feel a little bit better, and I started to see that I had a little more strength, I had a little more clarity, and by little I mean like micro increases.
Yeah.
But I could feel it. I could
Yeah.
feel there was something going on. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stick with this.
Yeah.
And so I did that for about a year and pretty much stuck with that protocol, not really adding much in, but doing the soup every day, 3 times a day, and, meats and a few vegetables,
Hmm.
and just sticking with that. And I think, though, that, the diet was part of it, but the other part was the lifestyle part of it.
Yes.
And really, uh, it kind of answered the thing that I had been looking for, which was a holistic approach.
Yes.
That it's not just the food, it's the food and the mindset and the, movement to whatever degree you can, and
Yes.
all the other things that we do to support ourselves. So I did that for about a year, and I think I got a little bit better.
Hmm.
And that's when I transitioned from Mary's group to you,
Yes.
because I felt like I needed some one-on-one. The group had been great to get me
Yeah.
started, but I felt like I needed some one-on-one, to really help coach me and to get really specific about the kind of prescription for what I
Yeah.
needed to,
Yeah.
because I was in it now. I was ready, and
Yes.
I um and I was completely a believer. So
And that's all it
Just,
takes. I mean, when you're that sick, like, a year, it's not like you were, walking around tons of energy or clear. Like things were still
oh,
pretty serious when I started working with you, but you had seen just enough little glimmers that you were like, okay, something's on the right track. And that's really what it is when you're healing this kind of brain injury, right? Is basically what we're
yeah,
calling it. Is that like you just see those little glimmers that tell you you're on the right path, but these systems take a long time to heal. So I mean, part of that mindset piece that I think you've been such a champion at is the patience, right? Of really letting things play out at their own pace. Can you
that's
talk a
part
little
of
bit
it.
more about like the mindset and lifestyle things, like what you found to be the most helpful in terms of that piece for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely learning the patience
Mm,
and really leaning into that, really just understanding that this is going to take a while. And, I still have my moments of being impatient, but I think just recognizing that this has to be a long haul
yeah,
proposition. And I'm not going anywhere. And I am so fortunate not to have responsibilities like kids and pets and all the
right.
other things. I have the luxury and the privilege of being able to focus on my health. And I know a lot of other people don't have that. Um, but I felt like because of that, I needed to really lean into that.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't have to go back to work and I didn't have to do all the things
Hmm.
that I might have had to do in other circumstances. And so just committing to this idea that it's a long road
Yes.
um, makes it a lot easier
It takes
to,
so much pressure off, right? So that you can really let your body actually heal. Yeah.
yeah. And you say this all the time, it's not linear.
Yes.
and, and I want it to be some days because I want to go from here to there and be
Yep.
better and be done. But who knows? I may never be the same as I was. Maybe I'll be better. I don't know. But I have to sit in this moment where I'm better than I was.
Hmm.
I'm seeing improvements all the time.
Yeah.
I'm having some setbacks sometimes,
Hmm.
but I also have a lot of tools and I
Yes.
have a lot of support. And so if I can remember that on my frustrated days and on
Yes.
my impatient days,
Yes.
that's so important. I
Yes.
have to just recognize that it's take a deep breath and just be in whatever this is right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and when we started working together, like you said, you had a really good foundation already. Like you had this really great long-term mindset. You were really dialed in on your nutrition, and then I feel like there was a few things that we were able to do together to just kind of hone in more. Like we really worked on honing in your supplementation, and
Yep.
we worked a lot on the oxalate issue. Do you want to talk about that at
Oh my
all?
gosh, yes. Yeah.
Because this, I
So,
think, was a big piece for you that you didn't really totally understand when we were first working together of like what was happening.
right. That's so true. Well, yeah, part of the whole detoxing process was getting rid of all those oxalates. And I
Yeah.
didn't really get that
Yeah.
at the time. So I was having skin rashes and I was having all kinds of other just yuck
Yeah.
that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And I don't I think my diet was probably not supporting um getting rid of the oxalates quite so much, or it was maybe I was having too much.
Hmm.
And so once we tweaked that, I started to notice first of all that I was detoxing tons of oxalates.
Yeah.
So the way it came out for me was just on my skin. My
Yeah.
chest was always rashed and my back was always rashed. And, I would have this itchiness and I would have this just, it would just come out mostly that way.
And you would see the
Um,
crystals, right? When you
yeah.
rubbed it. Yeah.
Yep.
I think so. This is so important because I think sometimes people who haven't gone through this, like they think it sounds totally crazy, right? Until you've actually like seen them coming out of your body and you had that
Right.
experience.
Yeah. They would come out all over my forehead and my
Yeah.
face. And they were just these little almost like salty crystals.
Yeah.
And they would, yeah, they would just pop out and I would feel them. I could actually feel them. Like I thought, oh, do I have a pimple or something here? And
Right.
then it would be a little crystal.
Yeah.
So that would happen so much.
Yeah.
And I mean, that really only cleared up in the last couple of months,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, that can take time. And this is another
Yeah.
example of like the healing is not linear because as your body gets healthier, it's like, oh great, now we can excrete all of these. And it feels sometimes like you're having like a new weird thing happen
Yeah.
when it's actually a healing process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I can feel that. I mean, one of the things that I think you've taught me really well is that, there are layers, and that as one layer kind of sheds, there's going to be another layer coming up
Yeah.
because this is very deep. And um so I that's another thing that kind of helps me stick with it, is
Yeah.
recognizing that. And when I feel, like you said, what feels like a setback now, I think, okay, this is a healing moment,
Yeah.
and I don't exactly understand what's happening, but I'm going with
Yeah. Yep.
it. So the oxalates were one thing. I think the other thing that I think has really helped, or that you've really helped me with, is just, yeah, fine tuning the supplements,
Hmm.
and really understanding what supports what.
Yeah.
So and really
Not just a
understand.
hodgepodge of like, here, take all these complexes, but like, let's really dial in on like, this is going to support this issue that's happening. Is that
Yeah.
what you
Yep.
mean? Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have to say, I have to plug your book right now too, because
Thank you.
I I always I spent some time before my last doctor's appointment just going through the descriptions of some of the supplements that I'm taking, and just I flagged those because I wanted to tell her about them, and I wanted to make sure that she understood and that I could articulate why I was taking.
Yep.
And when my Western medicine doctor looks at these, she's like, wow, this is a lot of supplements. Well, this is only probably 20% of what I was taking in the beginning,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we've worked together to figure out what's working and what we need. And, back in, I think it was the end of December, I got the flu, and you remember we stopped everything because I
Yeah.
couldn't keep anything down. And then we
Yeah.
slowly built back the things that I thought I needed.
Yeah.
And the very cool thing about that, I'm still jazzed about that, because it really felt like whatever happened in that illness was another purge.
Well, I really want to talk about that too, because I think this is a fascinating thing that happened. And I do see this pattern with people, but yours was like particularly clear in like how it all played out. So yeah, like just wrapping up the supplements. I mean, I think one thing that's important is that ideally, yes, we do want to get most of our nutrients from food, but when you have these really severe illnesses like you went through, sometimes we are depleted to the point where like we do need a little extra boost, right? And it doesn't mean forever. Like you're saying, you were taking this huge list at first, and then when we started working together, we kind of pared it down to some essentials. And since then, you've pared it down even more to just a couple things that are really supportive to you now. But it really is okay to have some targeted supplementation for your recovery when you've been through a lot, because the body sometimes can't get all that it needs from food when you've been through something like that. Um, and I think you're a great example of how that really the supplementation really has helped.
It really
Yeah.
has. Yeah, it really has. So
But
that's pretty exciting.
yeah, and then that kind of leads us because I think, we were saying you were doing all the oxalate dumping. We did a lot of work on the nervous system too. Like I taught you the tension releasing exercises, which I think I
Mhm.
mean, if I'll just say that I noticed a significant reduction in just your visible anxiety and just like feeling more just kind of at peace with like where you were in the
Mhm.
world as we started working through that. So this is just a way to help release uh, like more like physical tension that is being held in the fascia and the nervous system. So I taught Stacy very gently the exercises to do that. And I think that was big for you. But We also kind of hit a plateau at some point, right? I think it was
Yep.
maybe like 6 months into working together, like, we definitely had seen some changes, and then things kind of felt steady for a while. And it was at that point that I suggested we start doing a parasite cleanse because some of your symptoms really said parasites to me, and I always suggest this only if someone has really been doing all the things for quite some time already. So I know that their immune system has been really supported well for a good amount of time, because sometimes the immune system will just kind of eject things on its own, you know? But
Yep.
if we get to a point where it's like, okay, you have a good foundation, we know your immune system is a lot stronger, but I'm still seeing these signs that something is still overgrown in a way the immune system just can't quite get at, like, let's try an herbal cleanse. And I think this really spurred a whole sequence of events that really got you to the level you are now. And it wasn't exactly pleasant.
Right.
And so maybe I'll just let you share as much as you want to about, like, you did a couple rounds of this herbal cleanse and then your body kind of like took the lead. Do you want to just
Mhm.
share about that?
Yeah, that was one that I was a little skeptical about just
Yeah,
because, the whole idea of parasites is kind of gross.
sure. No kidding. Yeah.
But I thought, okay, we've come this far and I'm going to trust it and see what happens. And so I think um, I can't remember exactly how it went, but I think the first time I did it, I had a lot of purging,
Yeah.
and it really felt like something was starting to clear out that
Yeah.
had been stuck.
Yeah.
Um,
Stagnant. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I had diarrhea. I had just not very good. It felt like my digestion was weird,
Yep.
but it also felt like it was cleansing. And I think one
Right.
of the things that you've taught me is to be I feel like now I can be in touch with what's happening in my body and understand what's sick and what's healing, if that makes
Yes.
any sense.
Yes, exactly. And it's hard to tell the difference sometimes when you're not super in tune with yourself, but I think you've
Yeah.
really gotten a really solid intuition, yeah, around that.
Yeah. So I think it started to work. And so we did, I think, 2 or 3 rounds of it.
Mhm.
And each time it got more and more tolerable. It was less gross.
Right. Right.
Um, and then I think we were about to do another round when I got the flu, and then the
Right.
flu kind of cleared everything out, and it felt like that brought it to a natural, I don't know.
It's really amazing. I mean, we spurred kind of this purging through a couple rounds of these herbs, and then it really felt like, your body took the advantage of this flu virus you were exposed to. And I mean, who knows? Maybe it wasn't the flu, maybe it was just spontaneous purging. It's hard to even know at that
Yeah.
point, but it really felt like at that point your body just kind of took the lead and was like, "All right, we're doing this." And it's from what I recall, you had a very intense experience of a couple weeks of pretty intense purging.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
really sick for a couple of weeks, and that was hard to tolerate.
Yeah.
The mindset of, oh gosh, this is as sick as I was in the beginning.
Right.
It really felt awful,
Yeah.
and it was really hard not to be discouraged and really hard not to think this is gonna go on forever.
Right.
And so getting through that couple of weeks was challenging, not only because I felt awful, but just the mindset thing was
Yeah.
really shaken by
It's
that.
so hard to have those kinds of intense symptoms come back when you've been through so much trauma with your health, and
Yeah.
you really were a champion on just like trying to trust and like push through what was happening.
Yeah. So I mean, it was so interesting that my body didn't want anything. It
Yeah.
didn't want food. It didn't want it. I couldn't keep water down. I couldn't keep anything down. And so it was this huge fast and this huge purge and this huge cleansing. And once I started to feel better, it was really almost overnight
Yeah.
that I felt incredibly better. Not just better, but incredibly better, like
Like
shockingly better.
better than before when you first got like better than you felt in years is what you were telling me. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was shocking, and, that glow has faded a little bit
Of
now,
course. Yes.
a
It
few
always does. Yeah.
weeks later, but it kinda showed me that's possible, and I think that's one of the things that you really supported me with, is that
Yeah.
this shows you the window of possibility,
Yeah.
and if you can get there now, you can get there again, and it's
Yeah.
going to come back and it's going to stick. And,
Yes.
it's still going to be up and down, but it, um, that's the part that keeps me going all the time, is the
Yeah.
idea that if I had that much of a great window of recovery, then I'm just going to keep doing all the things and, you know, not mess with it because it's working.
Absolutely. And I mean, even since then, I think that you've had some remarkable improvements. And yes, of course, it's not like, you're just kind of back to how things were or anything like that. Like when you deal with severe illness, like it takes time to make a full recovery, but maybe you can share a little bit just like, where you are now and how much has changed.
Yeah. Well, I think a few things have changed. One is that my physical stamina has definitely increased.
Hmm.
I have a little more energy throughout the day. I always say that I think part of that is knowing how to pace myself right. But I also think that my body has a little more energy now, so I can push the edge a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I've been experimenting with that in the last few weeks, and it's felt really good to be able to go a little further and not have the kickback that I would have before.
Yeah.
If I did too much before, I would get a sore throat and I'd have fatigue for days and I'd be down for, quite a while, and it would
Yeah.
take a bit to recover. And now it feels like I can do more things, I can have more physical activity. I can do a little bit more exercise, gentle exercise. It's still very gentle and very careful, but I can do a little bit more and a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I can be out, like, with all my vestibular stuff and all my brain stuff. I couldn't even ride in the car for a long time.
Yeah.
And now I've worked up to being able to be a passenger for half an hour
Hmm.
at a time, which is great. And I think that'll improve even more.
Yeah.
Eventually I'll be back to driving. I still can't. That's one of the things that's, the brain is the last thing I think
Yeah.
to come
Yeah.
to mind. Um, but, I feel like I can visualize myself driving now, which I
Yeah.
couldn't do before. And speaking of visualizing, as I said, one of the things that was most devastating to me through all this was the fact that my creative brain was frozen and I couldn't visualize. I couldn't imagine. My imagination was gone. I
Hmm.
couldn't think of anything like original. and
Yeah.
um and now it's coming back. It's still fuzzy, but it's coming back. And like, I couldn't, even when I was able to read a book, I couldn't see it like a movie in my mind.
Hmm.
And now it's starting to do that a little bit. Like, fuzzy, foggily, but if
Yes.
that's the word, but it's starting to do that a little bit. And I'm starting to be able to remember things like, I couldn't read a book and remember characters before. I couldn't watch a movie and remember characters before. I couldn't even remember the scene before.
Right.
And now I can, and
Yeah.
it's better. It's not perfect, but it's better. And I can enjoy some of the things that I couldn't enjoy before because my brain just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So I feel like one of the things that's really changed is how how my brain's working. Like, I visualize now that, like, these big rusty gears, and they were stuck for a long time and they were rusted together, and we've been oiling them and getting them ready and moving them a
Yes.
little bit, and they're creaking, but they're
Yes. They're
slowly
going.
moving
Yeah.
and going. So I am just so grateful for that. Every day I recognize some small thing that I'm able to do that I wasn't able to do before.
Yeah.
Um, and it just really moves me and touches me because, there were moments, you've heard me cry about this, that there were moments when I thought, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any better than this. And if I have to accept that, I can, but I'm not happy about it.
Right. Right.
And so, I keep seeing those little glimmers, those little moments,
Yeah.
and just, and I think that brings me to something that I know you talk about a lot too, and this whole idea of gratitude and a real gratitude practice.
Yes.
And both meditation and gratitude have been two things that have really helped me,
Yeah.
um, just keep going
Hmm.
and learning. learning the meditation skills to calm down my nervous system and to really be able to just be quiet and be
Yeah.
present has been tremendous. Even though I thought I was meditating before, I think I've gone to a whole different level now.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and the same thing with gratitude, there are just so many things that I can be grateful and happy for.
Yeah.
And um, really looking for those things in spite of all the rest of it, um, just is such a practice now. And it's
Yeah.
such a fun thing to be able to wake up and say, what am I going to be happy about today?
Yes.
Rather
Oh,
than
yeah.
waking up and going, okay, what part of my body is going to betray me today?
Yes. Or
And then,
even before illness when it was just like, what do I have to do next? What do I have to do next? You said
right.
you were always on, like always
Oh,
going. And like I think it's people who find these hidden blessings to their experience. Like now you know what it's like to be slow and quiet and grateful and in awe, and that's so powerful.
it's so powerful. And so, for a long time, I was telling people that I was on disability, which I still am, but
Mhm.
I'm old enough now that I can say I'm retired.
There you go. Yes.
And, I mean, I'm still disabled enough that I probably couldn't go back to work yet.
Hmm.
But I feel like just the mindset of saying I'm retired gives me the space to be still and
Yes.
to appreciate all the things and to putter in the garden if I feel like it and to
Yes.
do all the things that I can do now. And I never envisioned that for myself. I always thought
Yes.
I would go, go, go forever.
Yes.
And so this has put the brakes on. And, it just, I don't know, sort of philosophically, I think that so many people I know who have had this long COVID journey were a lot the same. They were sort of type A-ish.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
always running, always busy, never stopping, always achieving, always just trying to be at the top of everything
Yeah.
and take care of people and do things and be involved in things and there's a satisfaction in that, but there's also just a craziness in that
Yes.
um that you don't even realize until you kind of get off.
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I had a little bit of an identity crisis about that
Yes.
at one point, um, trying to figure out who am I without all that.
Yes.
But now I'm so grateful that I don't have to worry about it, and so grateful
I
that
love that. I feel like you don't really you're not really healing unless you have at least one identity crisis through the process, right?
that's so true. Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah.
I agree. I think if you're doing this right, you do change a lot.
Yes. Yes. You're
And
never the same. Yeah. And that's a
no,
good thing. Yeah.
and part of yourself won't recognize yourself
Yes.
as you're in this new place. And, I see that a lot with myself. And I think, oh, who's this person who's able to do this? And who's this
Yeah.
person who can just let things go? And who's this person who doesn't have to fix everything?
Yeah.
It's great. It's so freeing
Yes.
to be able to feel that sort of mentally and maybe neurologically.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, when I think about, how the nervous system reacts when you're trying to do all those things, and then how now I can really tell when it's getting ramped up
Yes.
and when it's time to say, okay, let's calm down a little bit.
Yeah, you have a whole different relationship with yourself now, and that deep intuition we were talking about before. And yeah, I don't want to dwell on your age too much, but I also think it's really important to point out because so many young people have and middle-aged people have long COVID,
Yeah,
that, if you were able to make the recovery that you've made and to change such deep patterns in terms of like you know, the way you eat and the way you enjoy yourself and your personality in a lot of ways. Like you were able to make these dramatic shifts in your recovery that you have so much gratitude for, and if you can do it, really anyone can, is what I would say.
yeah, I agree. I think anybody who's struggling, um, I would say two things. One is to really just love yourself enough to take a step toward
Yeah.
this and understand that it may not be easy, but it's it's something that is bigger than taking a pill or bigger than any one treatment that anybody
Yeah.
could offer. It's really truly a lifestyle change and a mindset change and and just a way of living
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
And some people might not be ready for that. It's kind of
Yeah.
scary when
Yeah.
you think about it, but it's also really exciting
Yes.
and really gratifying. And um yeah, I just think, I mean, I get teary all the time when I think about how
Yeah.
far I've come and how much support I've had from you and all the other people around
Yeah.
to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have done it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah. I
really.
mean, that the level of surrender that you've been able to embody. I mean, whether we're talking about, the lifestyle pieces, your attitude, your personality, the parasites, the oxalates, like on all levels, right? The surrender to really clearing out and rebuilding is just remarkable that you've been able to do it. And I appreciate being able to be a part of the team that helps support you through it.
Well, you're a huge part. You really are. And I'm so grateful for all of it. And I feel like, we still have a way to go for
Yeah.
sure. But I also feel like, if I can do anything to encourage people to just take a step and to try and to hang in there,
Yes.
um, and just to really take care of themselves in this holistic way,
Yes.
then I'm so happy to support that and
I mean, a
encourage
year ago
that.
you could hardly talk, and now look, I mean, we've just done like a half-hour interview where you told your whole story and so eloquently. I mean, incredible.
Um, thank you. Well, yeah, that's one of the things that I'm really pleased about is that I can do that now. And
Yes.
you're right, I couldn't do that a year ago. I got exhausted
Yeah.
from that a year ago. So, it's small steps, it's small changes, but they do add up. They really do.
Yes.
And once you start to see that, then it gets exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Oh,
I also just, I mean, I feel like now if this is all I get in terms of recovery, I'm fine with that. But, and this is a huge but, I see the possibilities
yeah.
for going way beyond this. And I
Yeah.
see the possibilities for being so much better
Yeah.
and maybe healthier than I've ever been.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to hang on to that until my body tells me otherwise.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a
But
beautiful place to be of just like, I'm good. And also,
yeah.
I know it's gonna get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that acceptance and
Mhm.
surrender that's so important, but also so motivating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up unless you have any last things you want to share to anyone listening.
No, I think thank you, Jen, for everything that you've done to support me and also just for sharing your knowledge with everyone. I think, I'm going to plug your book again. It's
Thank you.
really it's like you've done this brain download and just
That's what it felt like, kind of, yeah.
I bet it did. But it truly feels like whenever I pick up the book that I have you whispering in my ear. And
Oh, oh, I love it. I love it.
it's so great. And I think the thing that really touches me about this is that what you do is done from a place of love and it
Mm,
encourages everybody to start from a place of love for yourself.
yeah,
And um that's such a key part of this. Like there's a clinical part and there's a scientific part and there's a nutritional part and there's all the rest of it, but I think you make the point that it really all comes from this sense of love, loving yourself and
yeah,
loving the possibilities.
yeah.
So I would just encourage everybody to do that. Get the book, read the book.
Oh my gosh, what a beautiful endorsement. Thank you. That's
You're
incredible.
welcome.
And thank you for taking the time to do this and being brave enough to share your story. I know that can be really vulnerable to share in that way, but I think it's so important for people to know what is possible because often we hear the worst case scenarios, you know, we don't hear the miraculous inspiring stories as much. So I think it's so important to have this out there.
It is. I was lucky to be inspired by people
Yeah.
who made similar progress. So I'm happy to share. Thank you
All
so much,
right.
Jen. This has been really great.
Okay, well, I am gonna go ahead and stop the recording.